Hi, this is Steve Galosi, and tonight on Forgotten Mysteries, I have for you The Braiding Collection by Patricia Wentworth. And this is copyright 1949 by Lippincott. And I don't know if you could see on the spine there, it's their mainline mystery imprint, named for the Philadelphia mainline, where Lippincott was located. And Lippincott published books show up on this channel occasionally. I don't feel like they ever had a really strong, top-notch mystery list, but they did publish some good books, and Patricia Wentworth was one of their authors. Patricia Wentworth, very patrician name, right? It sounds very upper crusty, was an English woman. Her real name was, I wrote this down, Dora Elles Turnbull. So I guess Patricia Wentworth just sounded a little bit more upscale as a pseudonym. And she was very prolific and known for this series, the Miss Maud Silver series. She also wrote about 30 additional books under pseudonyms and under her own name, and they were not all mysteries. So very prolific and quite well respected, quite popular, quite successful. I had never read anything by her before this book, but these names, they kind of float around in your head and you hear them and you see them. And so when I saw this book, I thought, okay, this is going to be my introduction to Miss Maud Silver. So I guess the first thing I can say is that I found this book to be very competent, very much in the Agatha Christie vein, right down to Miss Maud Silver is a spinster like Miss Marple, and she is a sleuth like Miss Marple. But there are some differences. Miss Marple is kind of a retiree who manages to get involved in crimes, and she often pretends to ignorance, in sort of that Columbo way, so that she can get people to speak more freely to her because she's disarmed them with her sweet old ladyhood. Miss Silver is, while very likable and very smart, she's also a bit more of a drill sergeant. She's a little bit tougher, and her job is a private investigator, right? She is not just doing it as a hobby like Miss Marple, but people actually come to her when they have crimes to be solved, which, if you think about it, is a pretty forward-looking approach here in the 1940s, right? To think that people would come to a female private eye who, she may not be out there with her guns blazing and, beating the crap out of people in bars, but she brings her own brand of observation and logic to her cases. And as a result, she's developed a bit of a name, and people come seek her out. So in the first chapter of this book, she receives a man by the name of Louis Braiding, who has a very interesting hobby. He collects jewels, famous jewelry, that is associated with terrible things happening, like a necklace that a woman was wearing when her husband killed her and her lover in a jealous rage, or a ring that was worn by an infamous person from history. So he's got this whole collection of jewelry with really bad karma attached to it. And I thought, that's kind of the joy of collecting, right? That you find your thing that maybe nobody else in the world is interested in, but it becomes your thing. And that is Louis Braiding's thing. He's not a particularly nice man. He's not a particularly well-liked man. And what he has a very interesting living arrangement, which I'll tell you about. And he also has a private secretary, James Moberly, who's kind of his assistant, who lives with him and helps him with, the jewels. And Moberly has a bit of a checkered past that Braiding holds over him. Basically says, you're going to work for me, and I know you're going to step out of line, And I know if you step out of line, I've already prepared a packet of information for the authorities that will expose what you've done in the past. So basically, you're tied to me for life and you really have no other choice. Okay, bad idea. Bad idea, right? To basically enslave somebody and blackmail them for their entire lives. And Brading consults with Miss Wentworth because he just has a feeling that something isn't right. And I know that's probably not enough of a reason to, engage a PI, but his feeling is based on certain things that have happened. For example, that he's sleeping much more deeply and waking up much later in the morning, which leads him to wonder if he's been drugged. And he just feels like there's this gathering gloom around him, that something on the horizon is out to get him, and he wants to hire Miss Silver to help him. And she says, "No, I won't help you. I won't. What you're doing to this man, James Morble, your private secretary, is wrong. I'm not going to be party to it. If you had half a brain in your head, you would stop it right now and find yourself a secretary who wants to be with you. This can lead to no good, and you've put yourself in this own situation. I'm not going to get you out of it." So right in the first chapter, Miss Maud Silver is establishing her personality as a no guff-taking person. And Louis Brading leaves kind of a little bit with his tail between his legs, but like I said, he's not that nice or not that sensitive, so it's really not that much skin off his back. Then immediately in chapter 2, we switch over to the story of Stacy Mainwaring. She's a divorced woman. She had been married to a man named Charles Forrest, and she is now supporting herself as a painter of miniatures. And she has a good reputation, and she is able to support herself, in her own flat, and she's doing well in her post-divorce years. So she gets a commission from the daughter of a sort of larger-than-life stage actress named Myra Constantine. And Myra is never described as a beauty. She's always described as hippopotamus-like and with a face that could stop a clock. But those aspects of her led her to really be able to just let her guard down on stage and inhabit whatever part she had to play or sing whatever she had to sing. And so she's famous and well-liked, even if she's not a great beauty. And she has a personality to go with that, that very flamboyant stage personality who talks way too much and bowls people over and interrupts them, but you kind of have to like her. You like her chutzpah. You like the fact that she's been a survivor all of these years. And she's self-conscious about her appearance, although she doesn't really say that all that much. And she's never allowed herself to be painted, but she sees an exhibit of Stacy's work, and she says to her daughters, if you could get her to paint me, I would allow myself to be painted. So her daughter Millie, who's married a little bit up in life, a dutiful daughter, runs to Stacy and says, "Please, this is our only opportunity to get a miniature painted of our mother. Please, will you come to do it to a braiding house?" And Stacy knows a good chance when she sees it, and she says, "Sure, I'll come on down." Except that the braiding house is located near the house where she lived, Saltings, when she was married and went through this kind of unpleasant experience with her ex-husband and ended up divorced. And she knows Louis Brading. Brading was a friend of her husband's, and Brading didn't like her, and she just felt like the whole situation was going to be weird, and why should she put herself in it? But she said, I really can't lose this opportunity. I'm young in my career, and painting this actress will be good for my visibility. So she thinks like a modern woman. She's young, and she's a little immature. She's not quite formed yet, but she's not immature in an obnoxious way. She's immature in a naive way, or a way that doesn't quite understand how the world works yet, which is part of what leads to some of the misunderstandings in this book. But she's a likable character. So I don't want to go on with the plot summary too long, but I want to point to what I found to be the key, really interesting aspect to this book. This is what I would call a real estate mystery. And by that I mean there are plenty of mystery books where the actual location, the locale, the setting is a piece of architecture that is odd or offbeat or not quite in the right place at the right time. It's a leftover from a previous era, or it's way ahead of its time in terms of being, forward looking. And, there are a lot of books that have used the odd layout of a place as part of the sort of the foundation of the mystery. And that takes place here. So I want to see if I can explain to you what the physical setup is like. So Louis Brading, who's, he's come home from the war. He's not as wealthy as he used to be. He can't really afford to maintain his house. He sells it so that it can become a private club with apartments. And within the main house, he keeps a study and a billiard room. And off the doorways to those two rooms, there is a glass corridor, see-through, that's always lighted, that leads to what they call the annex. And the annex is where the jewel collection is kept and fondled and maintained and etc. And the annex is hermetically sealed. Right? It's supposed to be burglar proof. And Brading has his quarters in there, with kitchen, bedroom, bathroom and all that. And so does his assistant. His assistant has a chamber and a restroom. So when Brading is killed, as he is, we know from the beginning he's going to be the victim. What gets set up is a locked room mystery, which I think many writers who have been prolific want to try their hand at a locked room mystery. And you know what? When they're done well, they can be really, really good. And the geography of this place and its quirks are so well defined and so much a part of the investigation that I kind of like that. I always have had in my head what the annex looked like, what the main club looked like, what Brading's rooms looked like, and that doesn't always happen for me. I'm not always. I'm aware of the location a lot of the times, but it won't necessarily make an impression on me. But this time it did, because it was quirky and different. And, Louis Brading is found dead. He is shot with his own revolver. It's made to look like a suicide, but we know that it isn't. And it just so happens, these coincidences happen in mysteries, that the chief constable down there, March, was a former pupil of Miss Silver. Miss Silver used to be a governess, a prim governess, before she went out on her own as a private investigator. March was one of her students. They were very fond of each other. They find a note from the murdered man saying, if anything, they find a note from Brading that he has written to, addressed to Miss Silver, but hasn't sent yet. And he says, something's really wrong. I know we didn't get off on the right foot when we met each other, but something's really wrong here. Please come down. Please figure out what's happening, or the plot that is sort of gathering around me, and you can name your price. So she's no fool. She wants to go down there, and she knows that she will get to work in cahoots with March, her friend and former pupil. And so her investigation technique is a bit Miss Marple-esque in some ways, in that the way she questions people is she pulls her knitting out of her bag and she very deliberately knits while asking questions and, really putting people on the spot, asking really good questions. So there's a little cognitive dissonance when she's interrogating people, because they think, on the one hand, oh, here she's this sweet, harmless little old lady who knits, while also realizing that she's nobody's fool and she's really smart, and you've got to watch out for her intellect, because if you're doing something wrong, she's going to find out about it. And the book proceeds really through the eyes of two characters, through Miss Silver herself as she's doing her investigating, and through Stacy, who's trying to negotiate her divorce, her unexpected reunion with her ex-husband, who obviously still loves her, but she's divorced him because she felt that he was not trustworthy, that he was a thief. And so all these kind of plots sort of intertwine, and it makes for good, leisurely reading. The characters are well drawn. As I said, the setting is also nicely well drawn, and there are enough quirks, enough quirky things in the book to keep your interest. What I'd say, though, is that the quirks are what I call constructed, meaning that you would see them in a mystery novel and nowhere else. So, for example, the murdered man has asked a woman, they call her Mrs. Robinson, but she's divorced. So it's weird to have him calling the woman he wants to marry Mrs. Robinson. Her name's Maida. He asks her to marry him. And the instant he asks her that, he goes and rewrites his will to leave everything to her before she has even accepted his offer. Come on. Really? I mean, no, that would just never happen. But it adds, a layer to the plot that has to be investigated. And there are also some other things in here that are just strange. And if you look too closely at them, you feel their constructedness. But if you don't dig too deeply and you're willing to just read, take the book at face value, then I think you will be fine. But when you close the book, you may think, this wasn't quite right, or that seems a little odd, or no, I don't really see how that happened. But the solution absolutely makes sense. The motivations are logical. The way they figure out, what happened and who did it, and why and how, is revealed little by little. So the pacing is good because there's not really a dull stretch in the middle, which can sometimes happen in these kinds of books. And you close the book thinking, I've had an Agatha Christie type experience and it's been enjoyable. She's not as... One of the things I really like about Christie is she almost never overwrote. Her books were almost always the perfect length. She knew when to get in and when to get out. This one is a little more discursive. There's more words. It's probably 30 or 40 pages longer than, say, a typical Agatha Christie book would be. And that's because there's a lot of dialogue, a lot of verbiage that doesn't necessarily add anything to the plot, but that makes you enjoy the characters, especially Myra. And Wentworth is very good at using a person's conversational style and words to convey their character. So I thought she did a particularly nice job because, you get these country house murder books and everybody's a type and they seem interchangeable and their names even seem the same. And so it can be kind of hard to keep up with who's who. But I didn't have any problems with that in this book. I felt like everybody was well delineated. So overall, I would say that I enjoyed my introduction to Miss Silver. I would definitely read more books featuring her. Some of them are supposed to be really, really good. my only criticism, like I said, would be some of these constructed aspects that don't really hold up to deep scrutiny, and that I think it's a little longer and a little talkier than it needed to be. But I realized from the first 2 or 3 pages that I was in good hands with this author. I mean, right? I mean, readers, we know in the first 3 pages, okay, this is going to do it for me, or I'm not so sure about this. Sometimes we're proven wrong, and that's always a nice thing. So just a few other little interesting details. I'd like to talk about publishing history here. First is that reading this book made me realize that the jewel heist or jewel plot genre, I think, has basically gone away. We don't, I can't think of a lot of really modern mysteries that revolve around jewels, jewel collections, jewelry theft. It was a thing, it seemed like, more back in the day. Another writer who I definitely have to review for you one of these days is Henry Holt. He always did a lot with jewel heists and jewel switching and jewel forgeries, and he did a great job with that kind of plot. And so, even though I'm not particularly into jewelry, like I'm unadorned, right? I don't wear anything. But jewels have played a role in humanity, almost from the beginning, and they create absolute, fanatics. A friend of mine sent me a link to a Tiffany website and said, "Oh, if you're thinking about what you'd like to get me for my birthday, here's a link for you to check out." And I clicked on the link, and it was this exquisite, necklace that was it must have been built 1 millimeter at a time, featuring hummingbirds and flowers. It was gorgeous, and it can be yours for the low price of $349,000. So I can appreciate good jewelry and the craftsmanship that goes into it, and the artistry of it. I've edited art history and art books in my career, and have learned a lot about the making of art and technique. And, it's not easy. Painting with those oil paints is not easy. Getting the effects that those Italian Renaissance painters got, that is not easy. So it's nice to kind of be pulled back into an era of glamour where jewels were the big thing. And, I thought about Elizabeth Taylor and, all these other celebrities and high society women who would, keep their jewels locked up and then bring them out for social events. So that was a nice step into the past, and it's not something that I think we see a lot. The cover, which, pretty nicely encapsulates the book, I think screams, this is a woman's book, right? This is a book that women are going to read. And, but that never stops me. I'll just read anything that I find interesting. And it reminded me that I had been on a panel a few years ago with a very nice woman. I can't remember her name, even though I liked her very much. I think it was Alina. And I wish I could remember her last name so I could recommend her books to you. But she was talking about how her books are shelved under the category of women's fiction. And I said, I'm glad you said that. Tell me, please, what does women's fiction mean? And she said, she couldn't come up with an answer. And we had a good laugh about it, because it ended up being kind of a group discussion with the people who were there, just trying to figure out what exactly women's fiction is. And, if anybody has any ideas about that, I'd love to read them below. I mean, I kind of have my ideas, but anything I could say could probably easily be argued against by the other side of the aisle. So I think that probably this cover said to women, read me, and said to men, pass me by. And I always think that that's kind of a shame, because a good mystery is a good mystery, regardless of whether the sleuth is a woman or a man. The publisher did something. I talk about this rather frequently. On their back cover, they used it to market some of the other books on their list, including books by people who have been reviewed on this channel, including Lawrence Blockman and William Irish. So you see that back there. And then another thing about this particular copy of the book that I just thought you might like to see because it's interesting is take a look at the end paper here, right? So this was at one time owned by a paid lending library where, in the days before public libraries, or even, at the same time, you could go and rent a book. And what you see here is the price of the rental. It's a stamp. And get this, it says 2 cents per day, 3 cents per day, each day after 14 days, and a minimum of a 5-cent rental, right? So right there. So, I mean, what could you buy with that kind of money now? I mean, not even a gumball. And I've always been kind of fascinated with these paid lending libraries and what their business model was and how they worked. Was it a successful business model? There seems to have been a lot of them. I have several books that were formerly held by these paid lending libraries, all in very, very nice shape. So it looks like the borrowers and the owners took very, very good care of the books. I mean, this is 1949, and you can see it's in nice shape. The binding's not cracked. The cover is not chipped or ripped or stained or anything like that. So, I wonder, could we ever have those sorts of libraries again nowadays? I don't think so. Or I know so. If anyone thinks otherwise, please tell me. Because I hate to say this, and it kills me, but I think that as a society, we have really become used to the idea that somehow books should be free. And when you go and you borrow a book from your local library, your library has paid for that book, right? They have given the publisher revenue. They are giving the publisher money that they need to support their operations and pay their editors and hire good cover designers and get the books printed and into the distribution network, right? But when people go to book conventions and steal every book they can get their hand on so that they can resell them on Amazon or eBay, and it happens a lot, or when they download pirated copies of the book because they think, why should I pay, $7 for a book when I can get it for free on some piracy website? Publishers don't make any revenue, and nor do authors. And, we're a society that thinks nothing of spending $1,000 for a cell phone, but we want books to come for free. And that's something that we just have to fight against. I mean, I think that ship has sailed. Publishers are kind of doing the best they can with the new business models. But I hope the people who watch this channel buy their books or borrow them from people or institutions that have purchased them instead of illegally downloading them. I might get some people throwing tomatoes at the screen because they disagree with me. But hey, this channel, for better or for worse, is one man's opinion. So that's what I've got for you tonight. I've got the Braden Collection, a Miss Maud Silver mystery by Patricia Wentworth. And I think if you check it out and you like the Agatha Christie style, locked room mystery, country house murder, likable heroine, interesting characters, you might find yourself becoming a fan. Okay, that's it for now, and I'll see you next time. Oh, look at my shirt. Bonus points if you can tell me what that is. And maybe I'll I don't know, maybe I'll put it in the little write-up that contains this video so that you can check to see whether you're right or not. Okay, thanks again. Have a good night. Bye.